The call from the past. In a quiet corner of his Silicon Valley home, Sundar Pichai sat by the large glass window, sipping a warm cup of chai. It was one of those rare mornings when he had a few hours to himself. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting a soft golden hue over the minimalist interior of his home. Everything was calm, until his phone rang. The number was unknown. International. Usually, Sundar would let such calls go unanswered, but something nudged him to pick it up. "Hello." His voice was soft but curious. On the other end, there was a brief silence. Then came a voice, gentle, trembling, old. "Is this Sundar? Sundar beta?" He froze. "Yes, this is Sundar. You might not remember me," the voice continued, "but I'm Mary. Mary, aunty. I used to take care of you when you were a small boy in Madurai." Sundar's heart skipped a beat. Memories rushed back like a tide, of a smiling woman with thick glasses, always wearing a cotton saree, making his favorite poa, singing old Hindi songs while braiding his hair with coconut oil, telling him bedtime stories under the flickering light of a lantern when the electricity went out. "Mary, aunty." His voice cracked. "Yes, beta. It's me." He stood up, heart pounding. "Oh my God. Mary, aunty. I remember you. How are you? Where are you calling from?" I'm still in Madurai. I found your number from a neighbor's son. He helped me search for you online. I just wanted to hear your voice once. I didn't know if you would remember me." Sundar sat down slowly, deeply moved. "I remember everything. Every single thing. You took care of me like your own child." There was silence, then a soft sniffle from the other end. "After your family moved away, I always prayed you would do great things. And you did, Sundar. I saw you on TV once, giving a speech. I cried." Sundar closed his eyes, the memories now clearer than ever. The way she shielded him during storms, how she made sure he never left for school without breakfast, how she sat by his side when he had a fever and hummed old lullabies. He opened his eyes, now misty. "Mary, aunty, thank you for calling me. Thank you for everything." "I didn't mean to disturb you," she said softly. "I just wanted to know you were okay." He took a deep breath. "You didn't disturb me. You just gave me something priceless today." They spoke for another 20 minutes. She told him how she now lived alone in a small rented room. Her husband had passed away years ago. She had no children. Life was quiet, lonely. But she still cooked, still sang old songs, still remembered the little boy who used to run into her arms after school. When the call ended, Sundar sat in silence. He looked around at his luxurious home, at the awards on the walls, the devices on the table, the towering achievements, and he felt a deep ache. How could someone who gave him so much be living so simply? And he never knew. Something changed in him that moment. He called his assistant and canceled all meetings for the day. "Get me a flight to India," he said. "India? When?" "Tonight." He stared out the window again, but this time, not at the sky. He was looking back at a small home in Madurai, where a woman with a kind smile once wiped his tears and told him he was going to change the world. And now, it was time for him to change hers. Back to Madurai. The night air in Madurai was warm, thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and distant incense. Sundar Pichai stepped off the private jet, dressed not in a tailored suit, but in a simple kurta and jeans, something humble, something that made him feel closer to the streets he had once walked barefoot as a child. As the car drove through the narrow, bustling lanes of his old neighborhood, he stared out of the window in silence. Each bend in the road brought with it 1,000 memories. The tea stall where he used to sneak samosas, the rundown movie theater that played the same film for weeks, the old banyan tree where he once hid his report card. And then, they stopped. The car door opened, and Sundar stepped out. In front of him stood a faded yellow house. Cracked walls, an old iron gate, and a rusted nameplate that barely held on to the letters. Mary D'Souza. He felt a lump in his throat. He walked through the gate slowly, the gravel crunching under his feet. He knocked once. No answer. He knocked again. Finally, the door creaked open, and there she stood. Mary Aunty. Older, thinner, her once black hair now fully white, tied into a bun. Her eyes behind thick glasses, still gentle, still filled with the same warmth. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then her hand went to her mouth. Sundar. He smiled. Yes, Aunty. It's really me. Her hands trembled as she stepped out and touched his face like she was afraid he was a dream. You came. He held her hand gently. I had to. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She hugged him. Tight, like he was still the little boy who used to cry when she went to the market. Inside her small home, nothing had changed. The same wooden chairs with hand-sewn cushions. The old wall clock that ticked too loudly. A faded calendar from 2012 still hung on the wall. And in one corner, beside her bed, a small framed photo of young Sundar with her, taken during his 10th birthday. He noticed the cracks in the ceiling, the fan that groaned as it turned, the single light bulb flickering now and then. You've been living here all these years? He asked softly. Yes, she said, pouring chai into 2 old ceramic cups. I didn't need much, and the rent here is low. He took the cup, holding it tightly. You should have told someone. Told me. She smiled, a little embarrassed. I never wanted to trouble you. I saw you becoming a big man. I didn't want you to think I was calling for help. He looked at her, his eyes moist. You never would have been a trouble, Aunty. You were my world when I was little. You gave me love when I needed it most. You made me who I am. She blinked, trying to hide her tears. And I'm so proud of you. Even now, I still make chai every morning and talk to your photo like you're here. Sundar felt something break inside him. He stood up, walked over to the window, and stared out. The same street where he once played cricket. Now quiet, dim. Then he turned to her. Aunty, I want you to pack a small bag. Why? She asked, confused. Because you're not staying here anymore. Not alone. Not like this. But Sundar, Beta, I can't just leave everything. He gently held her shoulders. Please, just trust me. That evening, he took her to a nearby hotel. Not just any hotel, but the best one in town. It was her first time stepping into such a place. She marveled at the elevator, at the soft towels, at the buffet with foods she couldn't even pronounce. This is too much, she whispered. You deserve more, he replied. That night, as she slept in a room filled with comfort and warmth she hadn't felt in years, Sundar stayed up making calls. He called an architect. He called a builder. He called a legal team. And then he called his mother, Amma. He said, I found Mary Aunty. There was a long pause. Then his mother's soft voice came through. How is she? Old. Alone. But still the same. I'm bringing her back into our lives. Good. His mother replied. She deserves it. The next morning, he sat with Mary Aunty on the hotel's rooftop terrace, watching the sunrise. Aunty, he said, holding her hand, I want to rebuild your house. Completely. New walls, new furniture. Everything. Her eyes widened. But Sundar. No, no more buts. You gave me everything when I had nothing. Now let me give you something. She was speechless. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I always knew you'd grow up to do great things. But this is something only a great heart can do. He smiled, eyes full. I'm not great, Aunty. I just learned kindness from the best. The woman behind the boy. The sun had barely risen, but Madurai was already alive with distant temple bells and the rhythmic clang of vegetable vendors setting up their stalls. From the rooftop garden of the hotel, Sundar, and Mary Aunty sat sipping tea in silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, a silence soaked in decades of memories. But Mary Aunty, her hands wrapped around the warm cup, finally broke it. "You remember the day your father got promoted?" she asked, smiling faintly. Sundar looked at her. "I do. I was so happy because he bought me a red toy car. But I also remember being scared to touch it." "Yes," she chuckled. "You left it in the box for 3 days. You told me," he said with a soft laugh, "that I should never value things more than people." Mary nodded. "And look at you now, leading the world in technology, and still sitting here like my Sundar Beta." He turned to her with deep respect in his eyes. "Auntie, I am only where I am because of the values you gave me. You didn't just feed me food. You fed me morals, strength, empathy." A tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. "I only did what any mother would do." "You were my second mother," Sundar said, his voice heavy with gratitude. "And now, I want the world to know about you." Later that day, Sundar met with a team he had flown in. Media professionals, videographers, and writers. "I want to tell a story," he told them. "Her story, and I want it to inspire millions." They began recording short interviews with Mary Aunty, asking her about Sundar's childhood. She was shy at first, but slowly she opened up, talking about his favorite bedtime story, the time he failed his first math test and cried into her lap, the day he rode his first bicycle, how he once helped her clean the courtyard without being asked. Soon, the video began taking shape, but Sundar wasn't done. He visited the old school where he studied. The building looked more like a forgotten memory. Walls chipped, desks broken, blackboards cracked. The headmaster, now an elderly man himself, remembered Sundar. He was a quiet boy, always thinking, but so polite, he said, tears in his eyes. Sundar promised a full renovation of the school. "Not just paint," he told the builders. "I want new computers, clean drinking water, internet, scholarships." Then, he did something else. He gathered a group of local women, nannies, caregivers, single mothers, elderly widows, those who, like Mary Aunty, had given their lives to raising others, but had no one left to care for them. He launched a small foundation in Madurai, Amma Hands, a program dedicated to supporting aging caretakers through housing, medical help, emotional care, and companionship. Mary Aunty was made the honorary chairperson. "Me," she gasped. "Chairperson?" Sundar nodded. "You represent every forgotten woman who shaped someone else's success, but never had a stage to stand on. Now, this is your stage." In the following weeks, Sundar oversaw the complete transformation of Mary Aunty's home. The old cracked yellow building was torn down, and in its place rose a warm, sunlit cottage with a garden, a reading nook, and even a small room for children who wanted to visit and hear her stories. Neighbors were stunned. One of them whispered, "This old lady must have done something holy in her past life." She just smiled and said, "I loved a child." That was enough. The day they moved her into the new house, Sundar held her hand and walked her inside. "From now on," he said, "you'll never spend a night alone again." But Mary Aunty's voice quivered. "Sundar, I don't need a new house. I don't need awards or cameras. I just want you to promise me one thing." He turned to her gently. "Anything, Aunty. Never lose this heart of yours. Never become too big to listen to someone small." He knelt down in front of her, like he used to when he scraped his knee as a boy. "That's a promise," he whispered. Meanwhile, the video of Mary Aunty's story was uploaded with the title, "The Woman Behind the Boy Who Became a Global CEO." Within hours, it went viral. People from across the world commented. They shared their own stories about childhood caretakers, forgotten mothers, nannies, and aunts. Donations started pouring into the Amma Hands Foundation. Local news covered it, then national media, then international networks. Mary Aunty, who had never even owned a smartphone, was now the face of quiet, enduring love. But the most beautiful moment came a week later. A group of children from the same school Sundar once attended came to visit her new home. They brought handmade cards, flowers, and one little boy asked, "Auntie, can you tell us a story?" Mary Aunty beamed. She took her seat near the garden window, adjusted her glasses, and began. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who asked too many questions. And Sundar, watching from a distance, smiled. Because now the whole world would finally hear the story that had lived in the silence of one woman's heart for far too long. When the world listened, the morning sun filtered through the curtains of Mary Auntie's new home. Birds chirped in the small garden outside, where flowering plants now bloomed in colors that looked like joy itself. But inside, something even more magical was happening. Her story, their story, was now echoing across the globe. The video Sundar had shared, of a forgotten nanny who helped raise a boy who would become one of the world's most powerful CEOs, was touching millions. News anchors called it a masterclass in humanity. Blogs labeled it the heart behind Silicon Valley. And on social media, a wave of people from every country and language began pouring their love into the comment sections. One user from Brazil wrote, "I remembered my old caretaker who raised me when my mom worked 2 jobs. I just called her after 12 years. Thank you, Mary Aunty." A teacher from Kenya posted, "We showed this video to our students to teach them respect and gratitude, not for kings and politicians, but for the women who cook for them." Even celebrities began sharing it. An actor tweeted, "True power is knowing where you came from." Sundar's story brought tears to my eyes. A philanthropist offered to donate thousands to the Hama Hands Foundation. The number of volunteers doubled, then tripled. Mary Auntie's simple life had unknowingly become a lighthouse for the forgotten. But Mary Aunty, sitting on her garden chair, didn't know all this. She only knew that the postman now brought more letters than ever before. "These are all for me?" she'd ask with a soft laugh. "Yes, Auntie," Sundar's assistant would reply, stacking letters from all corners of the world. Inside were handwritten notes, sketches from children, a card that simply read, "Thank you for loving someone before they were great." Yet, while the world listened, Mary Aunty still remained humble. "I didn't do anything special," she often said. "I just made sure he had warm food and warm hands to hold." But Sundar gently corrected her one day, sitting beside her on the steps of the garden. "Auntie, do you remember the day I lost my school debate?" "Yes," she chuckled. "You cried like the world had ended. I was ready to give up. But you told me, when the world turns its back on you, be the one who turns toward it with kindness." That one sentence, that one moment, it shaped everything I've become. She blinked at him, surprised. He continued, "You made me believe that being smart wasn't enough, that being kind made the real difference." As the days passed, Sundar stayed in Madurai longer than anyone expected. He visited old friends, sponsored libraries, arranged for scholarships, even hired counselors for schools so children with emotional trauma had someone to talk to. "They don't just need books," he said. "They need someone to listen." One afternoon, a journalist from an international magazine arrived to interview Mary Aunty. She brought cameras, lights, and a long list of questions. But Mary Aunty, sitting in her sari, offered the woman a cup of chai and simply said, "Before you ask your questions, tell me, who raised you?" The journalist paused, caught off guard. And then her eyes filled. "My grandmother," she whispered. And just like that, the interview turned into a confession. Tears were shared. Stories were told. No camera needed. It was never about the fame. It was about the forgotten people who hold our hands before we can stand. A few weeks later, Sundar surprised Mary Aunty again. "Pack your bags, Auntie," he said with a smile. "What now, beta?" she asked, worried and curious. "You're going to California." Her eyes widened. "What? Me? In America?" He grinned. "Yes, You're going to meet the team. See the place where your little boy now works, and tell your stories to people who think success starts with money. You're going to remind them that success starts with love." Mary Aunty panicked. "But I don't even know what to wear, what to say." He held her hand. "Just be you. That's more than enough." The journey was surreal. From Madurai's narrow streets to the glass towers of Silicon Valley. From washing clothes by hand to riding in business class. From boiling water on a gas stove to seeing voice-controlled kitchens. Everything amazed her. But what touched Sundar the most was when she stood in front of his entire team at Google, took a deep breath, and began speaking. "I never went to college," she said in her gentle voice, "but I raised a boy who now teaches the world." You could hear a pin drop. She continued, "Don't forget your roots. Don't forget those who fed you before you could earn, before you could speak, before you knew who you were." Thunderous applause followed, not because she was famous, but because she was true. After that speech, several team members from around the world sent messages to Sundar privately. One read, "I called my nanny after watching her speak. I hadn't spoken to her in 18 years. She cried when I said thank you." Another wrote, "You just healed something inside me I didn't know was broken." Sundar sat that night at his office desk, looking out at the lit skyline. He thought of Mary Auntie's tiny house, the old fan, the oil-lit stories, the songs she hummed while folding his clothes. She never needed a spotlight, he thought. But now the world finally sees her light. And then he opened his laptop and began typing something personal, an open letter to all caretakers around the world. He titled it, "To the ones who held our hands before we could stand." And at the very top, he wrote one simple line, "I am Sundar Pichai, and before I built anything, someone built me." Her final wish. California skies were a soft blue that morning, the kind that stretched forever. In the heart of Silicon Valley, a woman who once lived in a broken house in Madurai now stood beneath the fluttering flags of one of the most powerful companies on earth. Mary Aunty had become more than a name. She was now a symbol of gratitude, of humility, of the invisible hands behind every great man. But for her, none of it had changed who she was. She still asked Sundar's driver if he'd eaten. She still folded her cerise carefully every night, and every evening. She called the woman who now lived next door to her rebuilt home in Madurai, an old friend who ran a chai stall, to ask if she needed money for her medicines. Because even as the world watched her walk down red carpets and speak on global platforms, she remained grounded, humble in a way that made even the proudest bow their heads. One afternoon, after a meeting at Google's Mountain View campus, Mary Aunty and Sundar sat alone in a small garden behind the building. The breeze carried the scent of jasmine from a nearby planter, her favorite flower. She reached into her small handbag and took out something wrapped in soft cloth. "What's that?" Sundar asked. She smiled and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a tiny, old black and white photo. A photo of a young boy holding the hand of a woman in a cotton saree, both standing barefoot outside a house in Madurai. "You kept this?" Sundar whispered. "I've had it in my trunk for 30 years, she said. "When you left for the US, your Amma gave it to me." He held the photo gently, his fingers tracing the blurred image. This is the only photo of us from back then." "I know," she said quietly. They sat in silence again, hearts full. Then she turned to him. "Sundar, I want to go back." He looked at her, confused. "Back? To India? So soon?" "Not just back," she said, her voice steady. "I want to spend my days teaching other caretakers, women like me. I want to help them find strength. I want them to know that even if the world doesn't see them now, they matter." He leaned forward, stunned. "You want to start something?" "Not an organization," she said with a small smile. "Just a place, a warm place, where they can come, rest, learn, and feel proud of what they've done." He stared at her, inspired. "We can build that, auntie. Anywhere. We'll give it your name." But she shook her head. "No, name it after all of them. Name it after the ones who are still unseen." 3 months later, a quiet piece of land near Madurai loomed into a sanctuary. The Silent Hands House, a beautiful, serene community center for elderly women who had spent their lives raising others' children. It wasn't just a home. It was a haven. A place with gardens, books, warm beds, and classrooms where they could teach young girls how to care, how to lead, how to love with strength. Mary Aunty personally helped train the staff. She selected the bed sheets. She asked for a corner kitchen where they could still cook together. She didn't want it to feel like a shelter. She wanted it to feel like home. And on its opening day, she stood under the arch of flowers and cut the ribbon with trembling hands. Sundar stood beside her, proud like a son. Local leaders came, the media came, but more importantly, dozens of women came. Women with gray hair, tired eyes, and hearts full of old pain. They stepped into the home and found something they never thought they'd have again: dignity. Some cried, some laughed, some touched Mary Auntie's feet, and one whispered, "I didn't know we were allowed to feel important." A few weeks later, as the center settled into its rhythm, Mary Aunty called Sundar to the garden outside her cottage. "I have one last wish," she said, handing him a folded letter. He opened it. It was a list, written in her shaky handwriting. Names, about 25 of them. "These are," he asked, "girls who used to come to my house in Madurai. Some were neighbors' children, some orphans, some just girls I met at the temple. All of them, bright, but none of them went to school beyond class 8. She looked at him with eyes full of unspoken hope. "Can we find them? Help them study again?" He nodded, his throat tight. "We'll do more than that, Auntie. We'll give them full scholarships. We'll build their dreams, just like you built mine." In the months that followed, Sundar's team worked tirelessly. They found all 25 girls, now grown women, many struggling to survive. Some were housemaids. Some were street vendors. A few had almost given up on life. But when they received the call, they cried. And when they met Mary Aunty again, when they hugged her and saw her new home, they wept in disbelief. "We never forgot you," one of them said. "We just thought you'd forgotten us." But she hadn't. And now, thanks to her final wish, their lives were about to change. A small education trust was set up under the Silent Hands House. All 25 women were enrolled in adult education programs. Some wanted to become teachers. One dreamed of becoming a nurse. Another wanted to learn computers. And every Sunday they came back to the center, not as students, but as family. Sundar, watching all this from a quiet corner of the garden, finally understood. This wasn't just a story about a nanny and a tech giant. It was a story about legacy. Not the kind measured in money or fame, but the kind that lives on in others' lives. Mary Aunty didn't need statues or streets named after her. Her legacy was written in every woman who found her voice, in every girl who dared to dream again, and in the heart of a boy she once rocked to sleep, who now helped her change the world. The final promise. The monsoon rains had arrived in Madurai. Thunder rolled gently over the skies, and the gardens of the Silent Hands House glistened with fresh dew. Inside the main cottage, Mary Aunty sat near a wide window, her fingers knitting a small woolen cap for a baby whose mother worked in the nearby village. Even in rest, she chose to give. But time, as always, was moving forward. Her once steady hands had begun to tremble. The spark in her voice, though still warm, sometimes faded mid-sentence. Sundar noticed it during his visit. He had returned to Madurai for the quarterly review of the foundation, but something about the way Mary Aunty slowly stood up, how her breath slightly caught when she moved, made his heart twist. He watched her carefully during dinner that night. She smiled, joked with the young women, poured chai for the volunteers, but her energy waned quickly. Her eyes lingered longer on the photo wall of the center, Pictures of children, women, celebrations, and a small image of her younger self holding baby Sundar. After everyone had gone to sleep, Sundar stayed back. He quietly stepped into her room and sat on the edge of her bed. "You're tired, aunty," he whispered. She opened her eyes, as if she'd been waiting. "Just a little," she smiled gently. "The heart is full, beta, but the body, it has its own plans." He looked away, holding back tears. "I can bring you the best doctors, hospitals, care in Delhi, Singapore, even the US." But she gently placed her hand over his. "No, I want to be here, among my girls, among jasmine flowers. I want my last days to smell like rain on red earth, not sterile white walls." He nodded slowly, feeling like a child again, not the CEO of one of the world's most powerful companies, but just a boy afraid to lose his mother figure. "Promise me something," she asked, her voice softer now. He looked at her with deep reverence. "Anything." "Don't let this place become a memorial," she said. "Don't let people light candles and forget. Let it remain loud with laughter, with teaching, with dancing, with life." He held her hand tighter. "I promise." A few weeks passed. Mary Aunty stopped walking the gardens. She began resting more. A local doctor visited daily. Women from the center sang to her, cooked her favorite dishes, read her letters from around the world. One evening, as the sky burned orange with sunset, she called Sundar again. "Do you know," she began slowly, "when you were 5, you once told me you'd take me to the moon." He laughed, tears falling even as he smiled. "I remember, and I think I believed I really could." "You still can," she said, "not to the real moon, but to the place where dreams go. Take me there, Beta. Let me go with peace." That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. He walked out into the garden, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and white champa. He looked up at the stars, then down at his phone. He began making arrangements, not to save her, but to honor her. 3 days later, the center hosted a gathering unlike any other. Over 100 women from across the state came. Journalists, local artists, school children, nurses, caretakers, and even government officials arrived quietly, respectfully, not for a ceremony, but for a celebration. Sundar stood on the small stage built in the middle of the garden. He looked at the faces before him, so many of them touched by Mary Aunty in ways they hadn't even fully realized. "Today," he began, "we celebrate a life that never asked for fame, never chased money, but gave everything." The crowd was silent. He continued, voice steady, but laced with emotion. "Mary Aunty showed me that love is not measured in gifts or words, but in quiet actions that echo forever." Then, slowly, he unveiled something beside him. A sculpture, not made of marble or gold, but carved from local stone. It showed a woman sitting on a bench, holding a child's hand with a gentle smile. Etched beneath it, "For the hands that held the future." Tears filled every eye. That night, under a clear sky, Mary Aunty lay peacefully in her bed. Sundar sat beside her, reading the hundreds of letters she had received from across the globe. He held her hand as her breath grew slower, more distant, more still. And just before dawn, she whispered, almost inaudibly, "I'm proud of you, my little Sundar." And then she was gone, but not into silence, into legacy. The funeral was private. Mary Aunty had asked for no extravagance, but what happened next could not be contained. Thousands shared her story. Schools in India, Brazil, Nigeria, and Japan started Mary Aunty Days, teaching students about unsung heroes. The Silent Hands House expanded. New branches opened in 3 more towns. And Sundar, in a letter he wrote to all employees at Google, said, "This company builds the future, but one woman taught me how to build people. May we never forget the hands that guide us before we can walk. May we always remember the ones who never asked for anything, yet gave us everything." In Madurai, When children walk past the garden where Mary Aunty used to sit, they stop. They sit on that same bench, beside her sculpture, and say softly, "Thank you, Aunty," because stories may end, but love like hers, that never dies. The seed she planted. 5 years had passed since Mary Auntie's final breath, but her presence had never truly left. In Madurai, the Silent Hands House had grown into more than just a community center. It had become a movement. 3 more centers now stood tall in different parts of India. A 4th one had just opened in Sri Lanka. Every building carried the same warmth. Earthy walls, flowering gardens, and the sculpture of the woman on the bench holding the hand of a child. Children came here to learn. Caretakers came to heal. And women who had long been forgotten came here to be remembered. Every room whispered her name. Every smile, every success, every soft lullaby echoed her legacy. And at the center of it all was Sundar Pichai, no longer just a tech leader, but the quiet guardian of a dream born in a one-room kitchen, beneath the flicker of a kerosene lamp. On a spring morning, Sundar arrived in Madurai for the anniversary celebration of the original Silent Hands House. He wore a plain kurta and sandals, just like he did on his first return visit years ago. No press, no convoy, just Sundar, the boy who once ran through those streets chasing kites and dreams. He entered the garden, now filled with colorful flags and the laughter of children. Many of them had grown up in the care of the foundation. Now, they were nurses, teachers, entrepreneurs. They hugged him like family. "Uncle, Mary Aunty used to tell us you were a naughty boy," one girl giggled. "That's true," he smiled, "but she also told me I could become anything." A teenage girl stepped forward with a guitar in her hands. "Sir," she said, "we wrote a song for her." As she began to sing, the melody filled the air. She had no throne, she wore no crown. Yet in her arms, kings were found. With every meal, with every smile, she carried love 1,000 miles. Many cried quietly, some openly. And Sundar, seated near her sculpture, closed his eyes and let the words wash over him like a wave from the past. After the event, he met with the board of directors of the foundation. All of them were women. All of them had once been lost, and all of them had been found by her. "We've had a proposal," one of them said gently. "Something big, something global." They explained the idea. A digital archive, a living library of stories of unsung women around the world. Mothers, maids, caretakers, teachers, guardians. It would be called Mary's Map. Every person who's ever been loved by someone unseen, one woman explained, will be able to mark that place on the map and tell their story. Sundar leaned back, overwhelmed by the beauty of the idea. It was so simple, so perfect. "Let's do it," he said, "and let's make sure every corner of this world sees it." 6 months later, the platform went live. Within 48 hours, Mary's Map was flooded. Dots appeared in Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, South America. Each dot was a memory. A grandmother in Ghana who raised 5 orphaned grandchildren. A nanny in Argentina who walked 5 kilometers each day to feed a child with cerebral palsy. A teacher in Bangladesh who gave her only shawl to a freezing student. Each dot carried a name. Each name carried love. And at the center of the map, there was one golden dot. It simply read, "Mary D'Souza, Madurai, India." She loved one child and changed millions. Sundar flew back to California that winter. He returned to work, to meetings, to innovations, but something inside him had changed forever. He kept a small frame on his desk now, an old black and white photo of a woman in a cotton saree holding the hand of a boy in sandals. When younger employees asked about it, he smiled and said, "That's my first mentor, my first leader, my first teacher." One afternoon during a global leadership summit, Sundar was asked, "What's the most powerful thing you've ever built?" He paused. The room went silent. He looked at the moderator and replied, I once helped build a place where women who had nothing could find everything. I named it after the woman who raised me. Her name was Mary. He continued, "It's not always about building technology. Sometimes it's about building people. That's where real futures begin." And the room, filled with CEOs, presidents, and policymakers, stood up and applauded. Not for his success, but for the story behind it. Back in Madurai, during the evening prayers at the center, the girl still sang her lullabies. Her chair in the garden was always left empty. But they said, when the wind passed through the flowers, it sometimes carried a faint voice, soft, warm, and filled with the kind of love that once changed the life of a boy named Sundar, and through him, changed the world.